Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and this video is a guide for all the level 80 Primals, or Trials, in Final Fantasy XIV. Think of this as a quick cheat sheet. I'm not going to go in depth on every fight's mechanics, I'm just going to tell you what you need to know, the most important parts. There are time codes on screen now if you want to skip to a specific fight, and I will only be covering the first version of each fight, the ones you have to go through for the story. This boss's tank buster is called Divination, and much like Tsukuyomi's, will hit in a cone in front of the boss, probably one-shotting anyone who isn't a tank if you're doing it synced. You'll need to alternate between moving close to the boss or far away for other attacks, but when you see water runes spawn on the floor, you'll want to stand in those to get a buff increasing your resistance to fire, to help you against the upcoming fire attack that is otherwise unavoidable. Beyond this, the boss will use other attacks you've seen before, such as a variation of the circular attacks moving around the edge of the arena seen in Shiva and Tsukuyomi's encounters. It is the add phase where things get interesting. There will be 3 adds: Puck, Peas, and Mustard. For this version of the fight, there's no hard kill order, and you might find that different groups have different ideas, but one tank should take Puck and Mustard, whilst the other takes Peas. Once they've been defeated, they will return, and this time the boss will cast a blue AoE in the centre of the arena that pushes back. Standing in that blue AoE will kill you instantly to boot. This add phase is a DPS check, because if you don't defeat all 3 adds in time, the boss will wipe the party. It can be worth using a limit break here, whether a ranged or caster one to hit multiple adds, or a melee to burst the last one down quickly. If you're wondering which is more efficient, it would be hitting multiple targets with your limit break. In the last phase, the boss will use unavoidable AoEs more, something you'll be seeing a lot of in Shadowbringers. When bosses get to the last 10% or 5% of their health, they will start ramping up unavoidable AoEs as a sort of indication that, hey, you really need to be killing this boss. But otherwise, nothing else to note. Innocence's tank buster is Righteous Bolt. Early in the fight, he'll summon several adds. Forgive and Shame are the smarter targets to kill first, in my opinion, but they'll probably be gathered up and AoE'd down, so do what you gotta do. Innocence also uses meteor circles and gaze attacks, and lots of things you've seen before. He'll also use some new rotating line AoE attacks, but the main thing to look out for is when he leaves the field and summons more adds, one of which is shielded this time. During this, a blue tether will go to 1 add at a time. Focus on killing the add with the blue tether, because if it isn't killed, it will explode into heavy group-wide damage. Beyond that, Innocence will use simple and fairly easy to avoid AoEs, just in a lot of new forms that you've probably not seen before, and stack markers and so on. Welcome to the final boss. The first final boss, that is. Hades will use an attack called Bad Faith, wherein he spreads wing-like protrusions, each covering half of the arena, with spikes coming out from them. Say his left wing will have spikes going forward, his right wing will have spikes going backwards, and you must just need to pick one to stand behind. He'll also use Double to cast 2 versions of other spells, just like Nabriales. Broken Faith will spawn circles on the floor with slowly descending markers. Make sure you aren't standing near a circle when the marker hits it, as it will explode in a radius around it, dealing heavy damage. They only explode once, so you can wait for one to explode and then go and stand in that spot to be safe for the rest of the attack. During the add phase, you'll want to gather up the adds and AoE them down quickly, as is almost always the case with adds. In the next phase, you'll need to keep an eye on Hades as he'll telegraph where he attacks. Shadow Stream hits the centre of the arena. Predation hits the sides of the arena. Echoes of the Lost will sweep an arm across the arena, meaning you need to stand behind that arm on the edge of the arena. For example, say he uses his left arm and he's going to swing it across. You just need to stand behind his left arm on the far side of that arena. He will also imprison players in jail. Free them by smacking the jail. When glowing circles appear on the floor and everyone is debuffed with Doom, one player must stand in each circle to remove the Doom debuff. As for the end of the fight, well, that's just a DPS check that I won't spoil. Welcome to the other final boss, and there are a lot of mechanics in this one. Almost right away he will reduce everyone to 1 health. If you aren't healed back to full health rapidly, you will die. So pop any healing you might have, and if you're a healer, don't be afraid to use some cooldowns here. Coruscant Saber is an attack that can alternate between stand close to boss and stand far away from boss. Then we have Absolute Fire and Absolute Ice mechanics. You've probably seen these before, but if you see the boss using Absolute Fire, you must stand still until the debuff wears off, much like Pyretic or whatever it was called. If you see him using Ice, the opposite. Keep running. For Ice, keep moving. For Fire, stand still. After a few goes, he'll start to imbue his weapon with fire or ice, meaning you need to remember which, as a short while later he'll end up casting either the ice or the fire in the form of imbued Coruscant. Sword of Light will trace a beam across the arena in the shape of a triangle, causing huge damage to anything inside the triangle. You remember Tien's Tri-Beam, which was actually kind of a square, but think of it like that. Don't stand in the Tri-Beam because you will die beam. He will also combine this with a summoned dragon attack that shows up on the edge of the arena and then sweeps across. Goes without saying, don't stand in its path. Following Absolute Teleport, there will be an active time mechanic that you need to pass. Anyone failing this will cause a wipe for the whole party. And remember, you can press just about any button during these. If you're on a keyboard, for example, you can just mash A and D, or A and D whilst 1, 2, 3 and clicking your mouse. Just hammer it for the duration. Once you get past this, the boss will quite literally break his limits and attack the party with a level 4 limit break. A level 3 tank limit break is required to survive this attack. Just make sure you don't cast the tank limit break too early so it wears off before the boss hits you. Following this, the boss will start chain casting limit breaks on you. For Braver, he'll direct cones at random players. For Desperado, it will be 2 stack markers. The party must split into 2 groups and remain stacked up separately, so a stack of 4 players and a stack of 4 players. This will hit twice as well, so after the first hit hits, don't move, stay there until the second hit has gone off. Finally, he'll use Meteor to drop giant AoEs on the party. Other than this, he'll have gained souped up versions of earlier abilities, and he will summon spectral allies. Now, the majority of these spectral allies will be doing things you've already seen, such as pushbacks and whatnot. When the summoner brings forth the dragons that target 4 players, the tethered players will need to make sure the dragons send their attacks to the outside of the arena by standing on the edges and facing them out. The Dark Knight will create 2 large expanding AoEs in the corners, which is combined with a series of other attacks. Effectively, say you have 4 corners, A, B, C, and D. B and C will have the Dark Knight cones on, drag the boss to A. During this, one player will be marked and that player moves to D, all whilst avoiding another summoned worm that will go whoosh across the arena. Finally, if you try and hit the boss with a limit break at any point during the fight when he's not in the middle of casting something, he will pop Hallowed Ground and become outright invincible for 8 seconds. Goes without saying, if you use a limit break and he pops his invuln, you need to try and cancel the limit break to save wasting it. You can use it when he's casting another ability, however, as he can't cast 2 things at the same time. Ruby Weapon's Tank Buster is Stamp, and it will also cast unavoidable raid-wide Ultimas. When the boss casts Flexiclaw and then Ravenclaw, keep an eye on the cracked lines on the floor. If the boss uses Liquefaction, you must stand on the cracks. If the boss uses Undermine, stand away from the cracks. You will also see split group stack markers and various AoEs and boss dash mechanics similar to Ravana or Ifrit, only this time it will zigzag back and forth. Once you get to phase 2, well, that's where the fun begins. When the Meteor project completes, a raid-wide attack will occur. But when the ads spawn, one tank must take each of them and split them up, whilst the group bursts them down. When the Meteor comes down, you must stand behind a comet. Think Behemoth. Stand behind comet to not be killed by massive explosion. Then, when you see the Magitech meteors, there will be small circles on the floor that travel along in one direction. Players must follow these, 1 player for each, and catch the meteors. If you've done the Auburn Monastery Alliance raid, it's a lot like one of the mechanics used in the final fight. In there, you'll probably recognise it indeed. So players just follow these, catch the meteor, then other players just need to destroy the caught meteors before they squash the player who's holding them up. How do magnets work? Emerald Weapon uses magnets. Emerald Weapon will also use a cyclical laser beam that requires the player to circle about the boss whilst it shaves off parts of the arena. Magitech Magnetism will summon bombs. 2 of them will be tethered together. The plus or minus signs will indicate whether they're going to be drawn together or pushed apart, so you need to plan out where to stand to avoid the damage. Side Scathe will strike half of the arena, and the boss will also have a blue knockback circle. Careful, it can be hard to see this if it's on the other side of the boss. I have definitely been pushed off by it when I was tanking because I forgot about it and didn't see it. In the second phase, the boss will target 3 players with a line AoE that pushes back anyone caught in it. So you need to make sure you aren't pushed back into a painful AoE. There are also complicated to explain AoEs where the boss will drop them into the arena, then they will shoot off in lines in the order they spawned in, so like 1, bam, 2, bam, 3, bam. So you need to make note of the spawn order and then you can stand in the safe spot. Hard to explain, but please do look at the video example playing right now to get a better idea of what I'm trying to say. Finally, when the boss creates a firing line of enemies, you just need to take note of which line has a gap in it. That is the safe spot to stand in. Again, check the video reference, as that'll explain what to do. Beyond that, you're good to go. Most of the other mechanics, you've seen them all before. Surprisingly simple fight for the ultimate weapon, but be on your toes as falling off the side is an ever-present danger. Early into the fight, another floating platform will show up on the opposite side of Diamond Weapon. Throughout the fight, you may need to swap platforms by standing on the glowing circle near the edges. The weapon has 3 versions of Adamant Purge. The first will cause him to spawn glowing claws on one side of his body, indicating that you need to go to the opposite side, the other platform, to avoid being hit. The second and third variations of Adamant Purge are basic stack or spread mechanics. Diamond Weapon will also hit both tanks with 3 laser beams in a row. These beams hit anyone in their path, so you might for example want to have 1 tank on either side of the platform with the rest of the group in the middle. The boss also uses a flare marker, typically on the 2 highest in the enmity list, say the main tank and the off tank. Once again, you'll want to spread out. You could stand the 2 markers on the far opposite corners or move to the other platform entirely if needs be. During the boss's second phase, he'll take his clothes off. Without that bulky armor, he'll get a lot more agile. 1 platform will be destroyed temporarily, and the boss will have a zigzag attack followed by a strong line AoE that takes up half of the platform. Stand somewhere safe between the zigzags and hope nobody on your team rescues you into death. He'll also have a knockback wherein you need to position yourself on the edge of the glowing circle so that you're knocked back into a corner, otherwise you'll fall off. But that does it, both for Diamond Weapon and for all of the level 80 trials in Final Fantasy XIV. I hope this video was useful, and I'll catch you next time.